76-59 winners at Seton Hall. UCLA beat number 18 Wisconsin 85-83. Number 25 Louisville 98-73 winners at SMU. Buckeyes football celebrating their national championship victory over Notre Dame. 34-23 was the final in Atlanta on Monday night. Buckeyes quarterback Will Howard.
We were in a rough spot, and I just got to give all the credit to the guys in that locker room.
Head coach Ryan Day says this is what it's all about.
My wife and kids, and then these guys. That's why I get up in the morning every day. It's just to try to make sure these guys reach their dreams and goals.
Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive.
That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Mornings can start feeling the same. Wake up, brush teeth, go to work. But with breakfast from Wendy's, it's like, wake up, brush teeth, Baconate with a breakfast Baconator. Roll with a sausage breakfast burrito. Buddy it up with a honey buddy. Or get seasoned with seasoned potatoes. And then go to work. Sorry. When you're ready for a fresh wake-up call, gotta be Wendy's.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
Oh, could this vintage store be any cuter?
Right? And the best part? They accept Discover.
Accept Discover? In a little place like this? I don't think so, Jennifer.
Oh, yeah, huh? Discover's accepted where I like to shop. Come on, baby, get with the times.
Right, so we shouldn't get the parachute pants?
These are making a comeback. I think.
Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
Smart is coming back. The days of just picking teams based on a coin toss are over. You need the latest stats, odds, and information. Make a plan. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Well, duh. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The only place in football where the offense is always on the field is on Moneyline. With the two best hosts in radio, Donnie Rightside.
If anybody wasn't watching, listen, I don't know what you were doing.
And Kevin Walsh.
Forget act like you've been there before.
On the SportsGrid Radio Network, SiriusXM Channel 159.
Best hour every day officially now underway. It is Moneyline right here on the SportsGrid Network, SiriusXM Channel 159, and away we go. Your boy Donnie Rightside here on a solo mission. Got a lot of good hot topics to talk about, a lot of fun to be had, and a huge day on Sunday that we are going to talk about today on Wednesday, Hump Day, tomorrow on Thursday, and also on a Football Friday right here on the SportsGrid Network. A lot of really good topics, as I said, to get down to, and it's almost like, where do you want to start? Now, if we do start quickly here with just a tidbit on the NFC title game, this morning looking over numbers, and I did miss out on a number. But sometimes we just want to be cautious with some of the wagers that we make and how they can impact our bottom line, right or wrong. Jalen Hurts, I'll start with here. Today is a Wednesday, and I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper later in the show, but I thought it was an interesting topic to start. Sometimes you take a look and say to yourself, Donnie, it's the fight against what you think is going to happen Sunday and or what you think that number is going to be. A lot of people will tell you in the gambling world, and there's no argument there, the only goal for the handicapper and a successful handicapper is get the best of the price, and then you live with it however the game turns out, what scenarios take place. So as I bring up Jalen Hurts' passing numbers, which haven't been all that great when Jalen Hurts is healthy, particularly late in the season. The FanDuel Sportsbook had a 179.5. Fanatics was at 180.5. DraftKings at 179.5. Bet365 had a 174.5 number on Jalen Hurts this morning. So I said to myself, should I bet this right now? Because I like that number. I'm betting on Jalen Hurts is going to be more than enough to be active on Sunday, and the approach he's going to take, which will be successful because the Eagles will need to score points against Washington. I don't think it's just a handoff fest for them, and they win this going away. So factoring in that Jalen Hurts would get somewhere around 200 passing yards, not the biggest leap of faith. So I said, you know what? Let me be prudent. Even though I like it, I might lose out on yardage here. I want to make sure what we're getting from the Philadelphia Eagles is a fully healthy Jalen Hurts, or as close to as healthy as you can be. Now, as I waited on that from, let's just say, 7:30 this morning to 11:05 a.m. this morning, at 365, which was at 174.5, is now at 181.5. So that number is gone. Is it a crazy number? Like, oh, I definitely can't take it now that it's that high. No, it's not. But that number is gone. I knew it was a lower number than the other books. I probably should have taken it just on principle, but I didn't and passed on it. And we can always go back and sort of settle on that. But I just wanted to get that out of there where we are looking at lines that are going to jump from day to day and what you thought about previous before these line moves and later in the week. Should you have just taken them? Should you have ridden that train, and got after it? I didn't on Jalen Hurts. I might rehash that, but as we all know, those numbers are always moving. Money never sleeps, and neither do the odds makers here. That one's out of the way. We'll get back to the NFC and AFC championship games in just a little bit, but some more business out here in the streets. You see the date right now? January 22nd, 2025. For me, basketball season hasn't started yet. This is the last week where I look at basketball, both college and the NBA, and say, I'm really not paying attention. And what I mean by that is I'm not watching games. I'm not hanging on the final scores. I'm not betting college basketball all that much and or NBA just out of a couple fun things where I think might happen here. Next week, once we get post NFC, AFC championship games, we have some good numbers piled up for college basketball, and the NBA starts to come into focus a little bit more. So sort of hanging around the outskirts of it, taking a little bit of notes here. Next week is when college basketball season per se starts for me. Handicapping it, getting good vibes here, being able to watch more basketball games, being invested emotionally in those, and also financially, that's when it starts. But the NBA yesterday was interesting for me. Two games that I looked at, the Denver Nuggets, minus 13 over the Philadelphia 76ers. That was a blowout victory. That wasn't hard to comprehend. 144-109. The Sixers are just a mess right now without Joel Embiid. Until he comes back, they won't be able to make the playoffs. Who knows if they're going to be tanking the rest of the way, but I thought that was an easy mark spot there to take the Nuggets. The other game that it did take was a home team, which was an underdog early yesterday, was the Toronto Raptors. They win 109-93 over the Orlando Magic. Just thought they were in a pretty good spot playing better basketball than they had been in the past couple months, and it worked out in my favor. Now, there's another game that I didn't bet, which I thought was interesting, which leads me into my next point. The Trailblazers and the Heat. That game ends up 116-107 in favor of the Trailblazers. Jimmy Butler did play in that game, played 27 minutes. I think he scored 13 points there, which is the bigger equation is, what's Jimmy Butler going to be doing in Miami, and how long is he going to be in Miami for? Because the expectations now, with the Phoenix Suns making a move to unlock 3 first-round picks in hopes to trade for Jimmy Butler, that he's going to go out to the Phoenix Suns. Now, the Miami Heat, with Jimmy Butler, even though he was suspended for 7 games, are 21-21 and an embarrassing loss at home to the Trailblazers. So we are led to believe that he is actually going to go over and say, I think I can improve the Phoenix Suns enough to make you guys championship contenders. Let me check the resume. Phoenix Suns, a 500 ball club. Phoenix Suns, who already have a big 3 that didn't work out, which is who? Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, who was supposed to be that missing piece, and Devin Booker. Is anybody out there, and I was asking Ben this question on the early line this morning too, who cares if Jimmy Butler goes to Phoenix? Is that changing any landscape? Does that mean Jimmy Butler's refocused and he's going to be the player he was 5 years ago? No, it doesn't. It doesn't change anything, except that you are headed for an absolute disaster in Phoenix over the next couple years. No first-round picks, no good players, and you're basically going to be in tank mode. I could see if Jimmy Butler was going to be the missing piece for Phoenix. Like, hey, Phoenix is 20 games above 500. We're just looking for another veteran presence, so when we get to the playoffs, we'll be able to exact revenge on anybody that's beaten us in the past couple years, including you, the Denver Nuggets. I'm not buying that any way, shape, or form. Jimmy Butler leaving Miami, good for him, he wanted out. Better for Miami that he's not going to be there and be a cancer to that basketball team. We always thought Jimmy Butler was the Heat mentality. This is what the Heat do. This is a Heat culture, as we like to say. Is it really? Mr. Heat culture himself hates the Heat culture and now wants to go play for the Phoenix Suns. Yeah, good luck on that overall. Good luck with that one. College basketball last night, if you guys were tuning in watching those, had a lot of pretty good games. A lot of top 25 action. A lot of stuff to look forward to. Iowa State ices UCF 108-83. Alabama at home takes down Vanderbilt 103-87. Tennessee, 68-56 over Mississippi State, a top 15 game, or is top 15 game, 6-14 down in the SEC. Marquette goes on the road and knocks off Seton Hall. We dropped Seton Hall, by the way, to 1-7 overall. Marquette, a top 10 team, easily winning that game by 17. Excuse me, no, that's 17 points, is it? Yeah, 17 points. I had to get my math skills up there. Ohio State on the road, upsetting Purdue, 73-70. Oregon at home, taking on Washington, which used to be a Pac-12 game, which is now a Big Ten game, 82-71. UCLA 85, Wisconsin 83, as the Badgers go out to the West Coast for the first time and get beat by UCLA at Pauley Pavilion. UConn hangs on, 80-78 in an overtime game against a 1-7 team in the Big East in Butler. Missouri gets beat by Texas on the road. West Virginia, who had such a big win over Iowa State, gets dropped at home by Arizona State, 65-57 in an ugly game. And Louisville goes on the road and absolutely hammers SMU 98-73. Get you updated, get you caught up. Hot topics are on the way. Let's take a look at some prop bets also from Sunday's action in the AFC and NFC championship games. It's your boy Donnie Rightside right here on the Sports Grid Network. It's Moneyline, and we're going to be right back to let it all hang out. Come on back.
We're the club you want to join, even though we'd have you as a member.
You'll like it here. We have munchies.
And the winning edge. This is the Sports Grid Radio Network.
With the news flash, I'm Bill Banks reporting. Brought to you by Progressive. Bundle and save at Progressive.com. 22 states are suing to stop President Donald Trump's order ending birthright citizenship. The practice guarantees U.S.-born children are citizens regardless of their parents' immigration status. Trump's executive order was signed on Monday. In Southern California, dangerous winds returned as wildfires burn in the Los Angeles area for the third straight week. Forecasters say that 70-mile-per-hour Santa Ana winds and low humidity elevate the fire danger. Power companies preemptively shut off power to more than 60,000 customers to prevent fires. In Ohio, a judge found a pastor guilty of failing to comply with the city's fire code when he opened a church to let homeless people stay inside during dangerously cold weather. The pastor of Dad's Place Church faces up to 60 days in jail. I'm Bill Banks with your news flash.
My son loves to fly kites, but my active psoriatic arthritis can sometimes hold me back. Now with Skyrizi to treat my skin and joints, I'm ready to go. Skyrizi, risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection for adults, helps with less joint pain, stiffness, swelling, and fatigue. For those who also have plaque psoriasis, 90% clearer skin is possible with just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
With Skyrizi, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement, and that means everything. Ask your doctor about Skyrizi today and visit Skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKYRIZI to learn more.
You've heard of smart bombs,
Smartphones, smart cars, smart watches, and smart glasses.
Now you can add smart player.
Giving you sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
This is the Sports Grid Radio Network.
Right back at it, Hot Topics right here on Moneyline, the best hour of your day. You know how it is. You know how it goes down. We keep the topics popping here. It is a hump day Wednesday, and it is a freezing cold couple days here in the Northeast. In southern New Jersey, I know a lot of the East Coast is getting pounded, even all the way down. I mean, we're just seeing some of the, I guess you'd call it highlights or video clips is probably the best way to describe it, from New Orleans getting like 10 inches. I'm looking at a post by Jeff Duncan from yesterday, the site of Super Bowl. What site is this, by the way? Or what Super Bowl is this? Like LIX. Like, I know the Eagles won Super Bowl 52 as I look back there, because I just know that as like the number. But why do we have to do the Roman numerals anymore? Like, wouldn't it just look better just to put a number by it? Like, hey, Donnie, I have no idea actually what Super Bowl it is this year, to be honest. Let me see if I can go here. What Super Bowl number is this? All right, so AI generating. Okay, Super Bowl. The 2025 Super Bowl is Super Bowl LIX or Super Bowl 59. Honestly, why don't we just call it 59? Is there anybody out there that's like, you know what? The Roman numerals look cool, but you as well as I do, I'm the common man. Like, I look at the Super Bowl numbers and be like, what number was that? Like, if you take me back to, I don't know, let's just go San Francisco and San Diego. Well, that was a hammer job Super Bowl back in the day. Or let's just say, one of the San Francisco and the Denver games back in the day, which were hammer jobs in the 90s. Just have the number next to it. Like, hey, we played in Super Bowl LV1V12. Stop. Give me the number. Just give me the number. Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Sounds better than Super Bowl LIX. Super Bowl LIX. Why don't we just call it LIX? LIX. Coming up in 2.5 weeks. And by the way, me scouting already down in New Orleans. The boys on Pro Football Today, we're going to be live all week long from New Orleans on Media Row. We're going to be there. Boots on the ground, interviews, content. Me, DRS, Kevin Walsh, Joe Lisi. That's going to be the crew that you need that week. Now, you know me, and I've always explained and what I do in my personal life, specifically with my, I want to say, eating habits, I guess you could say, because I do fast. And I have fasted now since September 1st of 2023. So September all the way to 2024, that was 1 year. We're in the midst of halfway through my second year, I should say my second year. I gave up alcohol, haven't had an alcoholic beverage since September 1st of 2023. I haven't had any caffeine since September 1st of 2023. And I've only been eating one time a day. Now, when I say one time a day, my window is essentially, let's say, an hour and a half. Because 11 a.m., when I go in the air, I'll munch on a snack just because, it's hard not to at that point. You're hungry. You put in a lot of work in the morning. I wake up usually around 5:45 to 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I finally get that first snack around like 11 a.m. Window opens up immediately after I end the show. I eat whatever I want. I want 5 or 6 pieces of pizza. I want Mr. Good Bars. I just want to eat candy. I want to have French fries. I want to have burgers, whatever I want. Once that window closes, there are no more calories throughout the rest of the day. So I go to bed, no dinner. There's no late lunch. There's no snacking at night, no nothing. And I don't have any carbonated beverages. I used to love Monster Energy drinks. That's out. I used to love Diet Pepsi, Diet A&W root beer. They were my favorites. Haven't drank any of those. I don't have any carbonation or nonsense in my system. Just water with a little splash of Mio to give it a bit of flavor here. That's all I have. So when you say, look, well, why are you getting into this? Because when I go to different places, like last year, we went to Las Vegas. And that is a place with wonderful places that you can eat. Overpriced because you're on the strip, yes. But I was eating burgers. It was Whataburger, Fat Burger, In-N-Out Burger. Those were my choices during the day. And it was a little bit messed up because by the time we were getting done our shows on East Coast time, like I'm eating breakfast per se out there, but it's my lunch. It was kind of odd. But in New Orleans, at least, we get a 2-hour time difference in the plus direction. Boy, it's a shame that we missed out on Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Miami, Jacksonville, in that range, because true East Coast time would have been fantastic. But I said, you know what? I got to start scoping out where I'm actually going to eat. Found a place called the Riverwalk right by the Convention Center in New Orleans that has some pretty good eats there. Even has beignets in that place. Anybody ever have a beignet? People have been telling me really good things about beignets, which I might have to partake in every single day on there. But the funny part is we were in Las Vegas and went out to eat. It was Kevin Walsh. It was Joe Lisi. It was Ben Stevens. And it was Ben's father, Rick, out with us. And it was an Irish-style restaurant, like maybe like a pub sort of. But you can get burgers. You can get whatever you wanted in there. I sat with them at dinner, and I had a glass of water. Yeah, I drank water. Everybody else had a feast. I was fine. No big deal. Wanted to hang out with the fellas. So this year, Joe Lisi's like, hey, I booked a restaurant down in the French Quarter, which is fantastic. Booked it for like 5 or 6. So I will be in New Orleans with all that delicious food, whether it's stews, gumbos, Creole food, whatever you call it down there. Po' boys, shrimp, all that stuff. And I'll be out at dinner, and I will have a glass of water again. Because I'm going to eat my lunch, normal time, normal schedule. I'm going to be in New Orleans. I'm not going to have any hurricanes down there. Any, what do they call them, hand grenades? I'm not going to be doing any of that stuff. Because that's me as a 47-year-old. Now, granted, there are some positives where I'm healthy. Started at 232, 233 in that range this morning, weighed in at 190. So there are positives. But for me, going to New Orleans with the boys, a place where, like, you know what? You don't have to wake up at 11:59 p.m. Yes, p.m. to get your next day started by being on the West Coast. Yeah, your boy's going to be drinking water, and your boy's going to be having some Mio. He's going to be eating lunch and not partaking in any dinner. Craziness. I just wanted to get the boys caught up because that's coming up quick. Like, this week is AFC, NFC championship stuff. The next week after that, that Sunday, I'll be leaving for New Orleans. Down there the whole week, and I'm telling you right now, better be my Philadelphia Eagles. I don't want any Super Bowl hangover before the Super Bowl even starts, where we're talking Washington down there in New Orleans as opposed to Philadelphia. Come on now, people. Now let's break down some of these games. Let's get after those prop bets, and let's have some fun. It's Moneyline. This is what we do.
We never stop giving you sports gaming strategies and information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Business hours are for losers.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
1973, George Foreman TKOs Joe Frazier in 2 rounds to win the WBC and WBA heavyweight boxing titles in Kingston, Jamaica. Foreman's shocking win set up the Rumble in the Jungle with Muhammad Ali. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
South Korean scientists have developed swarms of tiny robots working together like ants to perform Herculean feats, picking up and carrying objects many times their size, climbing together and hurling themselves over obstacles while moving objects over 2,000 times their weight. Is this the dreaded nanobot singularity? Each microbot is actually just 600 micrometers tall and meant to clean human arteries and carry targeted drugs, saving lives. So ignore the hype. It's all a question of scale. Follow me at Chicapalmo on X and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Moneyline.
You know what? If you listen to the fans, you end up sitting with the fans. As like a front office guy or head coach. You've heard that throughout the years. A lot of times I think the fans know way more and don't overestimate what the actual options are. You wake up this morning as a Chicago Bears fan. I don't think anybody's going like, oh man, come on. We wanted McCarthy over Ben Johnson. This was the prize here.
Catch Moneyline with Donnie Rightside and Kevin Walsh. Weekdays, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific. On the SportsGrid Radio Network.
There, Sporto.
We know you've been hurt in the past. Big stations with big promises lied to you, suckered you in.
We don't do that.
We're the real deal. You can take our information to the bank. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Yeah, we're going to start talking here about Washington, Philadelphia, Buffalo, and Kansas City. Any updates from yesterday, weather conditions, line moves here, and opportunities to try to press it down and make some money. But before we do that, the NFL coaching cycle is in full swing. Yesterday saw Ben Johnson, now the official head coaching hire of the Chicago Bears. I love that move for the Bears. I think it's perfect. You look at that offensive line, which we've just gone by, like, let's just say Pro Football Focus to keep it simple. Solid offensive line. You have a tight end in Cole Kmet who's very serviceable. You have 3 wide receivers that can get the job done. You have a running back in Swift that certainly is in the top half of running backs, let's just say, in the NFL. You have a defense that you can improve by spending some money, but Ben Johnson coming to town and saying, you know what? The expectations are here to win. I know this division. I was the best part of the Detroit staff. I am now with you. Let's start to turn the tables and get after it for victories. And I don't think there's going to be any, let's just say, honeymoon period. Like, what'd you want Ben to do? He won 4 games last year. No. The expectations for the Chicago Bears next year are competing for a playoff spot at a minimum. It's all there. I trust he's a very good coach, and the only thing that offense is missing is a very good coach. You have the young quarterback you think is going to be the franchise guy in Caleb Williams. And as I said again, running back, tight end, offensive line, and wide receiver, you are good enough to win next year. Win it all? No, I'm not saying that, but enough to compete for a playoff spot and be a thorn in the side of every single team in that NFC North. Now, a couple other news and notes and bits of information came down this morning while we were on the early line, both myself and Ben Stevens. One of those was we were talking about Aaron Glenn, who we got the reports yesterday, whether it's Josina Anderson or national accounts like Jordan Schultz. They're saying, you know what? The New York Jets are not going to let Aaron Glenn leave the building without a deal. Well, as it turns out, as we're reading in, that the expectations are that Aaron Glenn is going to be the next coach of the New York Jets. But Aaron Glenn left that building yesterday in Florham Park, New Jersey, and flew back to Detroit on the Jets team charter plane. That's interesting. Why would they let him get out of town? Well, as you know, it's still a negotiation. And maybe that job was offered, and maybe he said he likes this job. But there are still a few things that you have to sort of circle around and get back to. How many years is my contract for? Who am I going to be reporting to? Do I have any say in personnel? How about the general manager of the football team? Who is that going to be? And more importantly, what is my actual compensation? And the final piece, do I have to accept Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback, even if I don't want him? That's probably what the hang-ups are right now. Now, he did leave, but also ripping the New York Jets, because understand this. In the NFL, there's only 32 jobs. And last I checked, a lot of people want those jobs. So when you are an NFL team and you say, this is the guy I want as a head coach, and we are not talking about setting the world on fire and recreating the wheel, let's just say. Ben Johnson was the coach that everybody wanted. And I'm pretty sure if the Jets had a chance to get Ben Johnson, they would have probably gone after Ben Johnson. But that wasn't going to happen. Sort of saw he set his sights on Chicago early as the place to be, and that's where he wound up. That's where he should have wound up. I think it's a great fit for him. But now you've got like Aaron Glenn. And I've said this before. When you see Aaron Glenn command the room at a press conference or just interviews, he looks like a guy that's ready to take a head coaching job. On the outset, now granted, that is a big piece of being a head coach. You are now going to be the face of that franchise. They expect you to operate in the utmost respect of the press and put on a good face for the organization, win or lose, i.e. you're never going to embarrass the franchise, which is probably why Eric Bieniemy never got a job. We're saying he's going to embarrass the franchise, but it was clear he couldn't be enough of a leader of men and an organization where teams wanted to make him the centerpiece of their team, being the head coach. He's now back in college, floundering around at this point. But back to Aaron Glenn. This wasn't Bill Belichick with multiple championships. This wasn't another coach that could have walked into any situation and said, I have 6 or 7 teams bidding on me. You are number 6 in line, and good luck with that. This was a coach that has ran, and quite frankly, a mediocre defense over his time in Detroit. If you look at Detroit, nobody ever said that team is winning games because Aaron Glenn is their defensive coordinator. Nope. They said Dan Campbell instills the grit in that organization and that city, and Ben Johnson holds all the keys to the operation on offense. So Aaron Glenn posturing with the Jets just shows how bad that Jets organization actually is. A guy that wants a head coaching job, offered one, is now saying, yeah, I don't know if I actually want it just yet at this point. Come on now, Jets. That is a clown show up there. More talk next, right here on The Grid.
You're listening to your source of sports gaming strategies and information.
We call it the winning edge. It helps make the odds even.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Buckeyes football celebrating their national championship victory over Notre Dame. 34-23 was the final in Atlanta on Monday night. Buckeyes quarterback Will Howard.
We were in a rough spot. and I just got to give all the credit to the guys in that locker room.
Head coach Ryan Day says this is what it's all about.
My wife and kids, and then these guys. That's why I get up in the morning every day. It's just to try to make sure these guys reach their dreams and goals.
Men's top 25 hoops. Number 3, Iowa State blew out UCF 108-83. Number 4, Alabama 103-87 winners at home over Vanderbilt. Number 6, Tennessee beat number 14 Mississippi State 68-56. Number 10, Marquette 76-59 winners at Seton Hall. UCLA beat number 18 Wisconsin 85-83. Number 25, Louisville 98-73 winners at SMU. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive.
That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Welcome to Staples.
I am so pumped. My business is going to kill it this year.
Awesome. How can I help?
First, a new computer.
With Staples Home and Office Hot Deals, you save big on tech.
And new posters.
Save on custom printing, too.
And,
a new chair?
A chair. Who has time to sit?
Maybe all your new clients?
Now you're talking.
With Staples Home and Office Hot Deals, you'll find huge savings on custom prints, storage, chairs, and tech. And now save up to $175 off your print order. Exclusions apply. Visit staples.com/print for details. Ends 2/1.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time and switch to the expensive shampoo with amino acids. Sure, you don't know what those are or why you need them, but it sounds very impressive. And if you switch and save hundreds, you can massage it into your scalp every day. Now, if only you can get people to lean toward your head to smell those aminos. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For shampoo, Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
Be the master of your domain.
Get the SportsGrid mobile app so now you can get the winning edge while your wife is in a dressing room trying on stuff while you wait patiently on the uncomfortable chair. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Right back at it here. Big weekend here, and I am so excited. No, it's not just because I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. That does add to it. NFC Championship game at home in your own building certainly is a recipe for success. But this is usually the second best week of football of the season. I love divisional round weekend. Usually that was the 1 and 2 seeds coming off the bye, and away you went. But for me, now this weekend is number 2. Super Bowl is always fun, but it's always like, hey, you know what? It's 2 teams. You get 2 weeks to talk about it. If it's not your team, you're betting on it. You understand that. But that's the last football game of the season, so it is a little bit sad. Titanic matchups, a doubleheader on Sunday, ones that we can certainly look forward to and sink our teeth into. Now, resetting the table for this weekend's action, 3 p.m. kickoff in Philadelphia, 101-102 on the rotation, Washington and Philadelphia. Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts set to square it up. Weather conditions as of this time today on Wednesday, cloudy conditions, no big deal. Temperatures at kickoff, 38 to 39 degrees. That's fine. Precipitation currently in the forecast, 0%. That's fantastic. Weather, should I say, wind speeds under 10 miles an hour. So it's usually like 8 to 9 is what we're showing here. So no real issues. That means you get a clean slate for Sunday afternoon. If we look at the odds, they opened up on the Philadelphia Eagles at 4.5. Those odds have now bumped up at FanDuel to 6.5. Westgate in Las Vegas, 6.5. Other outlets across the board, DraftKings, BetMGM, and Bet365, all showing a 6-point favorite for the Philadelphia Eagles. Game number 2, 6:30 p.m. on Sunday. Rotation, 103-104. The Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. Josh Allen taking on Patrick Mahomes. Weather conditions in Arrowhead for this game, mostly cloudy, which is fine. Weather conditions, 30 degrees at kickoff, dropping down because it is a night game to around 25 or 26 degrees. No precipitation in the forecast, and wind speeds under 5 miles per hour. The reason I brought that up is last week we were looking at that Eagles game when the snow was going to come in, how effective that snow would be, and it was. Games do end up going over the total because you got a quick start to the game and a quick finish by all intents and purposes. But this week we're not worried about will the snow be coming in? Who's going to be more effective in that snow? Who does it actually favor? You know what you get. That total sitting at 47.5. And the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, that total identical at 47.5. We're not worried about either one of those games of weather conditions, which is half the battle. Fantastic. Remove that from the equation. Now you can handicap the games appropriately. Now, the next comments that are coming up here are mainly for the Philadelphia Eagles. Today is Wednesday. If anybody understands how the NFL work week works, it is Sunday you play a football game. Monday is typically you come in, maybe get a lift, maybe get a run in, maybe get that lactic acid knocked out of your muscles here, watch some film, get some treatment, and go home. Tuesday, again, if you're injured, you might have to come back to the facility and you get some work in and you get some rehab in. But most days, Tuesdays are the player's day off for the week. Wednesday, when you come in the building, you start to install your game plan. And some teams have practices on Wednesdays, but later in the season, you usually see just walkthroughs. Hey, guys, get in the classroom, get your treatment done, maybe get a workout, get a lift in. You finally start to feel a little bit better from Sunday's game, but we're going to have a walkthrough and say, okay, plays for this week, here's what we're centered on. Walk through them, half speed, get a jog in, head back into the building. When then the serious stuff takes place, obviously in the classroom, but Thursday and Friday, full practices, and you're ready to go. But you also get a release of the estimated practice report / injury report, which is going to be key. Now, if you are just reading the lines in the Philadelphia Eagles Washington Commanders game, as we told you, that line opened up at 4.5. And typically when you see that, it's like, okay, Jalen Hurts did get banged up in that football game. Is that going to be lasting? And what's going to take place this week? Now, as we said, we haven't had any practices, but the reports coming out of Philadelphia, as they are planning on Jalen Hurts playing on Sunday. And not just planning on him playing, he should be effective in that game. Why? Because the odds went from the 4.5 to 6.5 at FanDuel. And as we said, 6s at most outlets, along with 6.5s across the board. That means there's a tendency for the odds makers, the sharp gamblers, and public gamblers alike saying, you know what? If the Eagles are healthy, they're going to be the better football team, and you can't price them all that low, because I'll tell you this right now. If Jalen Hurts was banged up enough in this game where he was a game-time decision and might not be effective, that line opens at 4.5, and it goes to 3.5, and maybe 3 at that point. See where we're going with this? So the odds makers not expecting much difficulty for Jalen Hurts in playing this game, but the question is going to be how effective is going to be primarily on the ground. Quinyon Mitchell, good cornerback, he's banged up, but we know the lines don't really move because of cornerbacks. They move because of quarterbacks. So that's something to keep an eye on, because today you're going to get an Eagles walkthrough and an estimated report of how these players would have practiced had the practice been full. You'll see limited, see questionable tags, you'll see probable tags, you'll see doubtful tags. Get the picture there? But you'll know there. But also, when a player is injured, typically, he's not going to be made available to the press. The Eagles have already stated as of yesterday, Jalen Hurts will be made available to the press today. So there's that. The expectations are he's going to play. That number is going to be reflective of that. So if we do start with the Philadelphia Eagles game and the Washington Commanders, if you're looking, and the 4 books that I like to use, since I'm based in New Jersey, FanDuel, Fanatics, Bet365, and DraftKings. Not necessarily in that order. But as I told you to start the show, I was looking at Jalen Hurts as that passing prop, which was really low at Bet365 at 174.5, now being raised 7 yards today alone, because most of the other outlets were at 179 and 180 in that price range. So I did miss that. Jaden Daniels on the opposite side, 222.5 at FanDuel, 220.5 at Fanatics, 220 at Bet365, and 223 at DraftKings, which is why you always should have multiple books open at all times, because as you know, you're handicappers, you're gamblers. You ever lost because of a yard or two? We've all been there. Make sure you're getting the best pricing. It's the best way to do it, just trying to check things out live at the same time. Now, the expectations for Jaden Daniels. He's been very good over the past couple games, and quite frankly, very good over the large majority of the season. There's no denying that. If you're looking at his statistics through the air against the Lions, 299 and 2 touchdowns. The week before that against the Buccaneers on the road, 268 and 2 touchdowns. Remove the Cowboys game where only played a handful of snaps. Before that, it was 227 and 3 touchdowns, 258 and 5 touchdowns, 226 and 2 touchdowns, 206 and 3 touchdowns, 275 and 2 touchdowns. You get the drift. A competent quarterback throwing for a minimum of 206 yards. That's the low bar. The high was what? Was it last week? Yeah, I guess it was 299. So you can factor on him, talking about Jaden Daniels, being active. And if you are just playing out the way this game looks, 47.5 for a playoff game, that's a pretty healthy total, which is great. A number on the Philadelphia Eagles is favored by, let's call it 6 points. That means the expectations that Washington will be trailing in the fourth quarter are much higher, and you might get some extra passing props. Well, Donnie, that's not the way it works. Really? Did you just watch the Rams game against the Eagles where Matthew Stafford piled on the final 2 drives of the game because he had to throw the football? It does matter. But if we're being honest and you look at those 2 numbers and understand this, Jalen Hurts hasn't been all that effective from the pocket with volume. He's been effective with making plays count. Against the Rams, it was a snow game. 128, no touchdown passes. You try to remove that. The Packers wasn't a snow game. It was colder conditions. The Eagles had the lead. They were running the football. Only 131, but 2 touchdown passes. You go back to the last game he played before that, which was against the Commanders. He only had 11 yards passing because he was knocked out in the first quarter. But before that, did throw for 290 and 2 touchdowns against the Steelers. And the Panthers only threw for 108 and 2 touchdowns. And before that, the Ravens 118 and 1. But still, I look at that number. And let's just call it 179.5, which is what it is today at this point now. Would have loved to have the 174, but it's not there. What are your thought processes here on Jalen Hurts? Because for me, the Washington defense can be had. So the question would be is, even at an ultra-low number of, let's just say, 180 or less, is the better pathway for Jalen Hurts, do you figure, to throw for those yards with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith? Or is it to throw touchdowns with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith? So many different ways to break these games down. It's Moneyline. It's a Wednesday. We'll continue to do that next after this short break.
Loser is kind of a mean-spirited slur.
But it doesn't have to stick.
Tell them to listen to SportsGrid and fix it.
No, thank you. Later.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. Loser is kind of a mean-spirited slur.
But it doesn't have to stick.
Tell them to listen to SportsGrid and fix it.
No, thank you. Later.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. The Suns have completed a trade with the Utah Jazz. Utah will get an unprotected first-round pick in 2031. In exchange, Utah sends Phoenix some unconventional selections, all of them based on how Cleveland, Minnesota, or Utah finish in the standings. They'll get the least favorable first-round pick in 2025, 2027, and 2029. Ichiro Suzuki, CeCe Sabathia, and Billy Wagner have been elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Suzuki becomes the first Japanese-born player to earn election. He fell 1 vote shy of a unanimous selection as a member of the Mariners. He collected 2,542 hits and exploded on the scene in 2001, winning Rookie of the Year and MVP honors in his first season, despite being 27 years old. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive.
That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
That spice is 10 out of 10. Would recommend.
Hi, my name is Khadijah, and a little thing I love about the Chick-fil-A Grilled Spicy Deluxe Sandwich is that spicy kick of the chicken. It's just the right amount of heat, and it gets me excited. And then, pro tip, add that cilantro lime sauce. It cools it down. If the sandwich is at 100, the cilantro lime takes it to 200. It makes me want to, tell all my friends and family.
Order a Chick-fil-A Grilled Spicy Deluxe Sandwich and a Diet Dr. Pepper on the Chick-fil-A app for a limited time. Real guests paid for their testimonial.
Progressive presents Renters MVP's Most Valuable Possessions. Today's MVP, Joe Fallon's bedroom mini fridge. Sure, this pint-sized chiller's max capacity is 3 soda cans, but what it lacks in stature, it makes up in cooling strength. Each beverage a perfect 37 degrees every time. And the 2 feet Joe walks to get a drink, priceless. That's why his mini fridge is today's MVP. Keep your most valuable possessions protected by bundling your renters and auto insurance with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
If SportsGrid was a burrito, we'd be the one with steak and carnitas packed so full every bite made your cheeks poof out like Dizzy Gillespie, so the name stuck and now even your mother calls you Dizzy. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
$47.5 that total of the Philadelphia Eagles game. Just we were analyzing quarterbacks and, what sort of makes sense between Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. Two guys that have the propensity to throw multiple touchdown passes, they can do that. If we are looking at a price point, it varies a lot. And there's a lot of different numbers out here between these books. The FanDuel Sportsbook for Jalen Hurts to throw 2 touchdown passes is plus 142. That 365 is 165. See that? Multiple books help you get in there on bets that you like or dislike. Jaden Daniels, he has a price point of plus 125 on Fanatics, 365, and DraftKings. But FanDuel's got him at plus 142. If I just said today, because sometimes I do this, give me 2 players at plus money to score a touchdown in a game. You take those 2 players. If you get one, fantastic, you got plus money. If you get 2 of them, you really nailed it. If I ask the question today, Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels, if you took both of those guys at the high points, Hurts at plus 165 and Daniels at plus 142, one of those 2 guys is throwing 2 touchdown passes in a game that's stacked out at close to 50 points. I do believe that. Now, the question is going to be, which side do you actually think is throwing those touchdown passes? Because we know Saquon Barkley's been known just to hit home run after home run after home run. And when they get on the goal line, if Jalen Hurts is healthy, they're going to quarterback sneak it in. But there is something about the wide receivers in this game that really has my appetite. Because buying low in the marketplace usually makes the most sense. And when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, and I don't mean buying low like Jahan Dotson 3.5 yards. Like he needs 1 catch to get that. The guy's not even like in the playbook. We'll run 60 routes out there and maybe get a look once a game. That's not what I call buying low. But when you look at a guy like Devonta Smith, who his numbers today, FanDuel moved it to 48.5. It was 47.5 yesterday. But see here again, you have as high as 50.5 on Devonta Smith this weekend at Fanatics, and as low as 46.5 at Bet365. Devonta Smith is a great wide receiver. Conditions are for passing on Sunday. You can't just run the football and win, so somebody's got to eat. So when I talk about buying low, like Devonta Smith, when things are rolling high for the Philadelphia Eagles, you are not getting 46.5 as his pass receiving prop. You are getting 66.5 and higher at that point, which then takes you to Dallas Goedert, tight end. 37.5 at FanDuel, but 35.5 at Fanatics as that low number. He's been eating pretty good even when Jalen Hurts is in the snow and or banged up. He's been performing well. But then you take a look at A.J. Brown, the lead dog as the wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. Most of the time, you are in the 80s with A.J. Brown's numbers. You know where you're at now? Barely above 60 at 60.5. You say, well, Donnie, look at these games. I understand. And we went over the statistics. But you are buying at the absolute low point right now if you want those 3 guys. If you're flipping over to Washington and saying to yourself, which way are we going to go with the Washington wide receivers? De'Ami Brown, who has come on as of late, anywhere between 40.5 to 42.5. You take a look here at Jamison Crowder, like they're the low guys, 11.5, so not really needing that per se. Terry McLaurin, who Quinyon Mitchell's had some pretty good games against, 64.5 to 62.5, up to as high as 65.5 if you're betting there. Oladime Zaccheaus, he's listed around 20.5 at most of the outlets. Zach Ertz, that safety blanket over the middle, 29.5 to 30.5. So decisions. Rushing props in this game, which is going to be a fun one to play out because you got guys that can get after it. Saquon Barkley. Yes, this is not an error here. As high as 128.5 is his number. That's at 365 and DraftKings. 125.5 is the low number at Fanatics and the FanDuel. Jalen Hurts, we're not sure how that knee is going to respond this week. Last week, I took his prop at 37.5. It hit on the first carry that he had on that long touchdown run. This week, though, with the uncertainty, 29.5 to 30.5, depending on where you're shopping at for Jalen Hurts. That could be the ultimate bargain of the week or the ultimate bust of the week. Because if he is somewhat healthy, he will be running the football in that game. Kenneth Gainwell, I get down with Kenny G. 9.5 last week, 1 carry, got 10 yards. That's all I needed and cashed in. I did have a sell me something on the show, which needed to get to 20 yards at plus 325, where you saw Saquon get beat up a little bit on that swing pass. I was like, Kenny G's rolling out here. There's no doubt in my mind he's going to get 20 yards. Didn't actually get there, which is a shame. Oh, well. Austin Eckler to run the rock. Not really looking in that direction. 18.5 to 20.5. Brian Robinson Jr., 35.5 to 37.5. And then there's Jaden Daniels. What would you be more comfortable at this weekend with Jaden Daniels, guys? Is it going to be Jaden Daniels to run the rock himself, as we said, between 53.5 to 55.5? Or is it just the sheer amount of carries you figure Jaden Daniels is going to get? That's where you slide in and say, that's kind of interesting the way that goes. But if we are just looking overall at that game between the Eagles and the Commanders, I'm not in a rush to bet the 6.5, but I do think the Eagles win the football game. And as this week progresses, which again, today's a key day to understanding on that walkthrough, a projection for Jalen Hurts, you're expected the limited tag to be on him. But also, you're going to get word through back channels of how he looks and walking around and the expectations, and you'll hear him today talk. The one thing that NFL teams don't like to do from themselves is tell you exactly what they're thinking. Like Nick Sirianni's like, slap a little brace on that leg. He looks good to go, like he's faster than ever. They're never going to tell you that one way or another. But those lines, they do the talking. Let's say quickly on that Buffalo-Kansas City game, once we come back from the break, just set the table on some thoughts and perspective on the side and the total, and also what sort of gameplay we're going to get in that one. High scoring, low scoring, defensive battle, shootout. We'll find out next, right here on Moneyline.
It's a choice. Roll the dice or listen to us. Luck is finding a good parking spot. Strategy is getting the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The new SportsGrid app is now available on iOS and the App Store. Experience the ultimate sports betting companion that provides personalized content from your favorite hosts. In-depth matchup previews, game and prop picks, live odds, stats, scores, and more. All in one place. And of course, on the SportsGrid app, you can tune into our live television and radio coverage anytime, on the go, wherever you are. Download the SportsGrid app on the iOS App Store now. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Sports Rage tonight.
What do you think of the Aussie Open so much? And it's always something with Joker. He was crying about the network. It never ends with this guy.
It was disgraceful, mate. It's one of the worst overreactions I've ever seen. This Tony Jones was simply having a joke. It was Aussie humour. It's disgraceful, mate. I hope Alcaraz beats him in 3 sets.
It's Sports Rage tonight with Gabe Morency. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. On the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid Radio presents Gridiron Greats.
Quarterback Fran Tarkenton threw for a then-record 342 touchdowns while playing for the Vikings and Giants in the 1960s and 70s. Tarkenton led Minnesota to 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, but lost all 3 matchups.
We knocked on the door every year, but not being able to push across the line. I feel that I let myself down, my teammates down, people in Minnesota down, that I couldn't deliver.
For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
2007, the AFC Championship known as Manning's Revenge. The Colts beat the Patriots 38-34 as Indy overcame a 21-3 Pats lead.
Another running play. A dive walks in for the touchdown.
Indy scored 32 second-half points to finally knock out New England 38-34 en route to Peyton Manning's first Super Bowl.
For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
You're listening to the voice of authority. Sports gaming strategies and information on daily sporting events. In other words, information you can take to the bank. We are your trusted source for gaming, odds, and more. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Right back here on the SportsGrid Network, getting after it, having some fun, maybe cashing some tickets along the way. Buffalo and Kansas City, as we told you, setting the table earlier. By the way, the ticket counts in these 2 games, 35% on the Philadelphia Eagles. That line moved from 4.5 to 6.5. And the Buffalo Bills, Kansas City, that line's still stuck at 1.5, but 29% of the tickets on Kansas City. Home teams here, not liking it. by the public here. The general public pounding away on those road teams. As we told you, 47 and a half in both of those games for the total, but a big discrepancy also in the points themselves as these Sixers, I want to say. As the Eagles, close to 7-point favorites, and Kansas City more closer to a pick 'em at that point. But the quarterbacks are going to decide this Sunday's action as they typically do, unless Saquon Barkley runs for 340 yards in his game. Jaden Daniels, we expect a good performance out of. Jalen Hurts, we expect a competent performance out of. But it's a little bit different of a ball game in that second game with Kansas City and Buffalo. It's now Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Heavyweight championship fight. If you look at their passing props in this game, 228.5 to 230, depending on when you're shopping between Fanatics, DraftKings, FanDuel, and Bet365. If you look at Patrick Mahomes, he's higher, between 249.5 and 254.5 shopping-wise. So if I ask you guys today, which quarterback, it's crazy to even announce this or say it, but it feels like it needs to be said. Who are you trusting more? Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are going to say Josh Allen, which is insane to think about. It's Patrick Mahomes. He's home. He's healthy. This is what they do. When they match up with the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs, they beat them every time. It's how they get down. Can they do it one last time? A 1.5-point spread? You are just asking the Kansas City Chiefs to win this football game. That's it with Patrick Mahomes. Which quarterback would you trust more to throw for more? Because I just feel like if you do look at Josh Allen, can he throw for 230? Of course he can do that. Same thing with Mahomes at 250, let's call it. What's the pathway to victory in this game? Because I do think Josh Allen's legs can churn this weekend. 40, 50 yards, maybe 60 on the ground as a possibility. Patrick Mahomes, we do know he likes to run. He's a big game runner. But I look at that ground game where, let's just say, James Cook can handle those duties. Are the expectations here to have serious work out of the backfield for the Kansas City Chiefs? Isaiah Pacheco, boy, he looked a lot better in the beginning of the season than he does at the end of the season. Kareem Hunt, or is it on the shoulders of Patrick Mahomes? Is it Travis Kelce at tight end? Is it going to be that wide receiving core that you get what you get, right? Hollywood Brown, can he step up this weekend? Xavier Worthy, first-round pick, can he step up this weekend? DeAndre Hopkins, who just needs a pulse to step up this weekend after not making a single catch last week? Don't even get me started on that. But the interesting concept of this game is the quarterbacks we understand who's coming to the table. But how about the rushing yards in this game? Honestly, James Cook, between 54.5 to 57.5. If James Cook runs for under 50 yards, I'm not so sure Buffalo wins this football game. So there's one correlation. Isaiah Pacheco, between 30.5 and 33.5. Xavier Worthy's always an interesting one because obviously not volume, but they're just asking you for one carry for 2.5 to 3.5 yards. Not going to be in my playbook or my action, but just letting you know what that is. But those are the backs that we look at. And by the way, where is Kareem Hunt? There he is. 33.5 to 35.5. So the expectations are there will be some running game, but we're not expecting to be all that explosive, i.e. the Philadelphia Eagles and a guy with a rushing prop of 128.5 yards, whatever it might be. So you are going to have to pick and choose as you get there. Josh Allen, as low as 47.5, as high as 50.5 for some action there. Patrick Mahomes, between 24.5 to 25.5. The wide receiver room for these teams entering into it. Can you get some value? Curtis Samuel, 13 yards. Come on now, ridiculous. Shakir in that mid-50s. Travis Kelce, there we go. 69.5 to 70. He's back, people. And you know who else is going to be back tomorrow? Your boy DRS. Also Kevin Walsh. Moneyline will be back tomorrow. Chris behind the wheels of steel. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy your bets and win those tonight. Get after it.
everywhere.
You can get SportsGrid on the radio, TV, the internet.
We got your number, Sporto.
That shirt doesn't match. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Victory over quarterback Will Howard.
We were in a rough spot, and I just got to give all the credit to the guys in that locker room.
Head coach Ryan Day says this is what it's all about.
My wife and kids, and then these guys. That's why I get up in the morning every day. It's just to try to make sure these guys reach their dreams and goals.
Men's top 25 hoops. Number 3, Iowa State blew out UCF 108-83. Number 4, Alabama 103-87 winners at home over Vanderbilt. Number 6, Tennessee beat number 14 Mississippi State 68-56. Number 10, Marquette 76-59 winners at Seton Hall. UCLA beat number 18 Wisconsin 85-83. Number 25, Louisville 98-73 winners at SMU. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive.
That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Welcome to Staples.
I am so pumped. My business is going to kill it this year.
Awesome. How can I help?
First, a new computer.
With Staples Home and Office Hot Deals, you save big on tech.
And new posters.
Save on custom printing, too.
And,
a new chair?
A chair? Who has time to sit?
Maybe all your new clients?
Now you're talking.
With Staples Home and Office Hot Deals, you'll find huge savings on custom prints, storage, chairs, and tech. And now save up to $175 off your print order. Exclusions apply. Visit staples.com/print for details. Ends 2/1.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time and switch to the expensive shampoo with amino acids. Sure, you don't know what those are or why you need them, but it sounds very impressive. And if you switch and save hundreds, you can massage it into your scalp every day. Now, if only you can get people to lean toward your head to smell those aminos. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For shampoo, Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
No way football is played in the fall and winter.
Because the hits don't hurt as much when you're numb. Get the lowdown on all the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC all around the SportsGrid Radio Network in Sirius XM Channel 159. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. It is Wednesday ahead of Conference Championship Sunday. Always an important day. Each and every Sunday slate, each and every week around the National Football League. It is the first full day of practice for the first full week of practice leading in to Conference Championship weekend. Any reports that come out about the status, availability, and how much a guy practiced for a team getting ready for those conference title matchups this weekend. And of course, Scott, as only 4 teams still are in the race for a Lombardi Trophy, that means 28 others are already focused on the future of their franchises. We will talk coaching carousel around the NFL with some big-time updates early on this Wednesday, and of course, some news and notes from a Tuesday afternoon. A jam-packed hour here on Football Full Circle up until 1 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, did catch a little bit of the Ben Johnson introduction in Chicago. Boy, they are expecting miracles the way they brought him in. Good luck with that, with the division they're in and everything else that they have. Yeah, this is it's weird. Generally speaking, this is when you got to get geared up for, all right, let's start taking a peek at the games and mentally, more than anything else. Just, okay, I'm getting set now for football week on a Sunday. But with the conference or with the college football championship game Monday, Ben, I kind of need one more day just to kind of, pregnant pause here, really kind of gear up on Thursday more so than Wednesday this week because of the, the college football championship on Monday. It's funny how the brain works. You get into a routine and you just get used to that. It's amazing.
And at this stage of the season, Scott, those NFL teams still in the hunt for a Lombardi Trophy, playing on Conference Championship Sunday, feel much the same way you do. It's not a full practice where the pads are popping on this Wednesday afternoon, more than likely. Probably just a walkthrough, but still the status reports out of those practices are going to be interesting to determine. How healthy is that left knee of Jalen Hurts? What about cornerback in Philadelphia, Quinyon Mitchell? What is the status of the Commanders? The Chiefs seem relatively healthy, entering their most significant game of the season. What about Buffalo on the defensive side of the football? Any information that we get in the next 55 minutes or so, of course, we will deliver to you. But Scott, before we get to practice and maybe an early preview of those conference championship games this upcoming Sunday, let's talk coaching carousel, because in the last hour or so, a lot has happened. Let's start with the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, who many thought was the front runner to become the new head coach in Jacksonville. Well, as ESPN's Adam Schefter reported just about an hour and a half ago, Liam Cohen is taking himself out of the running to become the Jags' next head coach. He will remain in Tampa, now becoming one of the highest paid coordinators around the National Football League. Big news for the Buccaneers. Scott, as some have said around Duval County, shocking development for Jacksonville.
Yeah, Ben, I have my doubts. Like, who really would take themselves out of a coaching spot? I think, whenever I hear this stuff, and you hear it every single year, I think this is Cohen going to Jacksonville saying, well, what are you doing now? It's been a couple of weeks. What are we doing? Are you going to hire me? Are you not hiring me? Are you still interested? And Jacksonville just saying, well, we're not sure, this, that, what have you. And maybe them even telling him, you know what, we're not going to bring you in for a second or third interview. We've already kind of moved past you. And then he just kind of saves face and says, okay, I'm going to pull myself out. He gets a raise from Tampa Bay. I really doubt, I really do, that Jacksonville tells him, hey, we're still interested. We want to bring you in again. And yeah, you're one of the finalists. And he says, never mind. I'm going to stay an offensive coordinator with Tampa Bay. I just don't believe that. I just don't.
Yeah, it is interesting, Scott, because I do think that Liam Cohen kind of evaluated where he stood. And I think the Jaguars were very interested in hiring him as the next head coach, at least based on some of the reports that we are getting from those local reporters in Jacksonville. I do believe, as was my thought at the time when Doug Peterson was let go, but Trent Baalke, the GM, was retained, that many were skeptical of that situation in Duval County, that the head coach would have the caveat of not reporting directly into the front office, but rather ownership led by Shad Khan. That was kind of weird, and that many expressed a lack of desire, if you will, despite having a quarterback in place in Trevor Lawrence, to work under a guy like Trent Baalke. It would seem to be a desirable head coaching gig in comparison to at least the ones that we still have vacant at this moment and remaining around the NFL, and yet it's really not. I think Liam Cohen understood that he was one of the hottest commodities in this coaching circle and said, maybe the grass is not always greener. I'll get my opportunity. And much like Ben Johnson a year ago, decided it might be better for my career to stay in Tampa. Again, great news for Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. We can talk about that side of things in just a moment. But Scott, we thought we might start to see a couple of these head coaching vacancies filled after Detroit was bounced from the postseason. The only one that has been the Chicago Bears, of course, on Monday afternoon. I don't think it paints a very optimistic picture of where the Jaguars are viewed right now around the NFL.
Yeah, I tell you, but think about what you just said, though, Ben. And this is why it doesn't make sense to me. All right, so you have Baalke, the GM that supposedly no one wants to deal with, but you just said it, right? You're not really going to him. You're going to have to be answering to Shaka Khan, the owner, who's a hands-on owner. All right, so if that's the case, then great. I don't want to get along with the GM anyway. But then it's like, well, that is the pecking order, obviously, head coach, GM, and owner. But so which one is it? Are you dealing with just directly with the owner, or are you dealing with the GM? I mean, if you're Liam Cohen, we're not talking about Bill Belichick here. We're not talking about, pick any other really, really good head coach. You got to strike while the iron is hot. And you're telling me a chance to work with Trevor Lawrence in a division that's really, nothing spectacular outside of the Houston Texans, and you're a little worried about getting along with your GM, who's probably got 1 foot out the door anyway, if you don't have success this next season. So I don't know. Maybe. Maybe, but if that's the case, he thinks awfully highly of himself, and he thinks awfully high of that Tampa Bay offense, which was pretty good this year. I get that, but
yeah,
boy, I could see Tampa Bay just as easily going, 6-11, 7-10 next year, and all of a sudden Liam Cohen's no longer the hot figure.
Yeah, you're right. You are betting on yourself. Sometimes it could be a bad bet if things regress against you. I do believe the Buccaneers are going to be the NFC South favorites, rightfully so. Tampa has won the division now 4 consecutive seasons, and I do believe Liam Cohen is going to remain one of the hot names around the NFL, viewed as such in this coaching cycle, not just by Jacksonville, but of course some other NFL organizations. And Scott, it might not be just a direct implication of Trent Baalke, but the reason that Baalke is still there, the ownership decision by Shad Khan of keeping Baalke there, why he has not been fired or dismissed at this point, creating the situation where, yeah, you might not be reporting directly into Baalke, but that's even weirder than if you dislike the GM and were reporting into him. When you are a head coach, when you might be getting your first head coaching gig, you want to make sure the vision is clearly aligned around the organization so that if it is your big chance, you do not falter on doing so. And I think that is the issue with Jacksonville as a whole, as a franchise, not just who the GM or ownership remains to be. So Liam Cohen, who seemed to be the front runner in Jacksonville, is not. That really begs the question, Scott, who is next on the Jaguars list if they are back to the drawing board? There were some reports that former Jets head coach Robert Saleh had a great interview in Duval County as well.
Yeah, that would be the ideal spot for him, right? Me and George were talking about the Dallas Cowboys situation yesterday, and his name came up there, and I'm like, boy, then you talk about going from the pot to the frying pan. I said Jacksonville would actually be the one. Not that much pressure, out of the way, not a big market, so maybe that would work out well for Saleh.
Yeah, we shall see. He is definitely going to be in consideration now that Liam Cohen is out of the running. We'll talk the NFC South, we'll talk Tampa, and we'll talk other head coaching vacancies next.
4 out of 5 scientists agree it's smarter to be on SportsGrid, and we're pretty sure that one scientist is still a virgin.
He just gives that vibe.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
With the news flash, I'm Bill Banks reporting. Brought to you by Progressive. Bundle and save at Progressive.com. 22 states are suing to stop President Donald Trump's order ending birthright citizenship. The practice guarantees U.S.-born children are citizens regardless of their parents' immigration status. Trump's executive order was signed on Monday. In Southern California, dangerous winds returned as wildfires burn in the Los Angeles area for the 3rd straight week. Forecasters say that 70-mile-per-hour Santa Ana winds and low humidity elevate the fire danger. Power companies preemptively shut off power to more than 60,000 customers to prevent fires. In Ohio, a judge found a pastor guilty of failing to comply with the city's fire code when he opened a church to let homeless people stay inside during dangerously cold weather. The pastor of Dad's Place Church faces up to 60 days in jail. I'm Bill Banks with your news flash.
My son loves to fly kites, but my active psoriatic arthritis can sometimes hold me back. Now with Skyrizi to treat my skin and joints, I'm ready to go. Skyrizi, risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150-milligram injection for adults, helps with less joint pain, stiffness, swelling, and fatigue. For those who also have plaque psoriasis, 90% clearer skin is possible with just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
With Skyrizi, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement, and that means everything. Ask your doctor about Skyrizi today and visit Skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKYRIZI to learn more.
There's something you should know and always remember.
SportsGrid does not increase luck.
We're your unfair advantage for the latest sports gaming information. If you're looking for luck,
go find a horseshoe.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. Scott, earlier today on the early line alongside Donnie Rightside, we started taking a big picture approach to the NFL as most of the teams are in the offseason. And some conversation about what the odds might look like entering the 2025 offseason, preseason, and beyond. As we are talking about Liam Cohen returning to Tampa Bay to remain the Buccaneers OC in favor of taking the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching job if there was a formal offer even out there. Scott, I said to you in the last segment, I do believe that Tampa will enter 2025 as the favorite to win the NFC South. Maybe not in minus money, maybe not drastically in front of the Atlanta Falcons, but I do believe the Buccaneers, who have won the divisional crown in the NFC South 4 consecutive seasons, will be booked as the favorite, now reinforced with a talented offensive play caller in Liam Cohen. Scott, do you believe it's going to be the Falcons or the Buccaneers, or maybe the Panthers or the Saints, that will be looked at as the favorite to win the NFC South entering next season?
Oh, definitely the Bucs. Now, I'm not saying they're definitely going to win. I think depending on how much, Carolina improves and what they do with a draft and all the trades that could or may not be made, that may upset the apple cart. But as far as just going in, it's got to be Tampa Bay. Listen, it's not easy to be minus money, Ben. You know that. We've done this long enough to look at some of these preseason division odds. It's hard to be minus money, but they might. I don't know what New Orleans realistically is going to do with a quarterback, and they're going to bring back Derek Carr, but I'm not expecting any big flashes. Even what's the biggest flash? Sam Darnold. So put Sam Darnold on the Saints. Are they going to really make them, division championship quality? I don't think so. Carolina. I love what we saw to Bryce Young, right? How can't you over the last 6 weeks? Is he big enough to make that next step? Maybe, but not preseason wise. And then Atlanta, listen, I don't know what they're doing with their quarterback, right? Are they going to let Kirk Cousins go? They didn't exactly, play great down the stretch. So it's got to be Tampa Bay. Well, they end up winning again. Who knows? But I would think going in, they'd be pretty close to even money, if not minus money.
Yeah, at least to start the preseason or the offseason, Scott, no doubt about it. The draft, free agent acquisitions, trades, things like that could certainly change it, but I do agree. The Buccaneers should be optimistic keeping Liam Cohen. Anytime you can have congruency of quarterback and offensive coordinator and head coach, that consistent approach in an offseason could be crucial. Scott, you mentioned the Saints. Of course, still a head coaching vacancies. Some historic snowfall in the South this week is delaying the Saints' interview process. They were going to have in-person interviews with guys like Mike Kafka and namely Aaron Glenn, scheduled for today and tomorrow, that have kind of been moved back because of the travel logistics getting into the Big Easy, which, Scott, makes things very interesting in terms of Aaron Glenn, who yesterday had an in-person interview in Florham Park. I'm sure you and George discussed all day long on FFC. The Jets' intention was to keep him in the facility and never let him go until he agreed to become the new head coach in New York. Well, he flew back to Detroit last night and I guess is mulling over his decision, but reports saying it's basically Aaron Glenn's job if he wants it. Him flying back to the Motor City, Scott, tells you what about if Aaron Glenn actually wants to become the Jets' new head coach.
Yeah, it's kind of like, Ben, the good news, bad news. All right, the good news is for the Jets is, hey, Aaron Glenn, he spent, 9-10 years, whatever it was. I covered the Jets when he was there. Great guy. He knows us. We know him. Great, right? That's the positive news. What's the negative news? Well, that Aaron Glenn knows the New York Jets, that he knows all the failures. He knows where all the dead bodies are. He knows to stay away from this organization. Anyone that has been with him and close to him has got to be saying, don't do it. I mean, you got a quarterback situation, which is a mess. You got an owner now that wants to be hands-on, maybe an ambassador again now that Trump's back in offense as he was the first Trump term. I mean, who knows what's going on? You're going to play second fiddle to the New York Giants no matter what you do. Who needs that if you have the pick of the litter? And I'm not saying he's got the pick of the litter, but he's a hot commodity. If he has a choice to go elsewhere, the Jets, because he's been there, knows that, I'm going to stay away from the Jets. I do find it interesting, with the New Orleans thing, Ben, right? If you're the Saints, right, and actually more so if you're one of the guys that they're considering, what better way to show your interest in the Saints in finding the way to get your butt down there? All right, maybe you can't fly to New Orleans right now because of the weather, but maybe you can fly to Atlanta. Maybe you can fly to a nearby city and then, drive in and show the Saints, hey, yeah, you know what? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure I can sit in front of you before you decide a head coach. I mean, little surprised that no one would actually take the initiative.
It is really interesting, Scott, as well, because Aaron Glenn's role in interviewing in person for the Saints, is he truly taking time to look at his different scenarios? Or is he saying, I'm only going to interview with the Saints if I am not fully convinced I'm about to become the next head coach of Gang Green? That is the intriguing part of this all. And Scott, we did get a report as well from Josina Anderson, who, of course, has covered the NFL for many years, earlier this morning, that Aaron Glenn has made it known he's planning to take the Jets job, and that happened as early as yesterday per multiple league sources. The expectation is still that, barring a major setback or a flub, to which many people replied, and Scott, should be noted, the Jets have flubbed a lot of things in their franchise history, and certainly with head coaching hires.
Yeah, this would be just like the Jets, right? To have word leak out that they're going to hire the guy and then not get the deal done. And then you try and figure out why. Was it money? Was it power? Was it this? Was it that? But it'll be a smack in the face to the New York Jets like they screwed up again because, they're letting the world know that they want to hire this guy. And, the other thing, Ben, is, listen, he's a qualified candidate, don't get me wrong, but is he just being hired because he was a former New York Jet? I mean, that should be the last reason why you'd want to hire a guy.
It is also interesting, Scott, because Aaron Glenn has not been a head coach before, and yet the Jets are making him seem like he is the truth in the heir apparent to fix an organization that has been ailing. We'll continue to talk about the New York Jets, and if Aaron Glenn is the next head coach, that's next.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
1973, George Foreman TKOs Joe Frazier in 2 rounds to win the WBC and WBA heavyweight boxing titles in Kingston, Jamaica. Foreman's shocking win set up the Rumble in the Jungle with Muhammad Ali. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
South Korean scientists have developed swarms of tiny robots working together like ants to perform Herculean feats, picking up and carrying objects many times their size, climbing together and hurling themselves over obstacles while moving objects over 2,000 times their weight. Is this the dreaded nanobot singularity? Each microbot is actually just 600 micrometers tall and meant to clean human arteries and carry targeted drugs, saving lives. So ignore the hype. It's all a question of scale. Follow me at Capalbo on X and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
The early line.
But if we are looking out for you as the worst place to go between the Cowboys, Jaguars, Jets, Raiders, and Saints, where are you not going to?
Well, I'm not going to the Cowboys. Sorry. Just not happening. I'm not working for Jerry. If I'm looking at it, you basically set Mike McCarthy up to fail by doing absolutely nothing in the offseason.
It's the early line with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Weekdays, 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go,
there you are.
Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge
anywhere, even while the wife's talking to you.
If you've got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC. So, Scott, as we are discussing what Aaron Glenn might do, this was the report yesterday from Fox Sports' Jordan Schultz about how the conversation ended when Glenn left Florham Park to head back to Detroit. Sources tell Schultz a substantial offer was made and the Jets' job is his if he wants it. That in quotations, that basically Aaron Glenn gets to decide if he wants to become the next head coach of the New York Jets. We heard from Josina Anderson that the expectation is Aaron Glenn is going to be the next head coach, barring a major setback. And knowing the Jets, that could certainly happen. Now, Aaron Glenn, no doubt about it, along with his other former coordinator in Detroit, Ben Johnson, probably the two most attractive head coaching candidates throughout this cycle. But he has not been an NFL head coach yet, Scott, and there have been some conversations around defensive-minded head coaches or defensive-minded coaches becoming the head man versus those on the offensive side of the football. Again, I find this all very intriguing for the Jets to be so gung-ho. It's like, hey, man, you tell us what you want, and we'll get it for you. And this is Aaron Glenn, who now is going to kind of think about where he stands in all these circumstances to make the final decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big jump, right? I mean, and he's only been a coordinator for a couple of years, Ben. And realistically, what has this Detroit Lions defense done to distinguish themselves that it would make him such a great candidate? I know this year they were decimated by injuries. I get that, but they've been lousy, so it's not like he really was able to overcome that outside of one game against Minnesota. So, and I covered the Jets when he was there, nicest guy in the world. But, thinking back, never did I ever say, okay, I'm talking to a future NFL head coach. Just, quiet, unassuming. And he was one of the leaders of the Jets at the time. But I just never saw head coaching material out of him. He might be, I'm not saying he's not, but it just to make it seem like he's overwhelmingly the number one guy. Again, it goes back to what I said before. If he wasn't a former New York Jet, would they be so gung-ho? If that's the main impetus behind all this interest, who cares what he did 10, 15 years ago? If that's the case, bring back Rex Ryan. He was the former head coach. At least he's got head coaching experience. If you want to go down that train, bring back Ryan if you want to bring back, nostalgia. The whole thing has got failure written all over it. It really does. It's typical New York Jet. It hasn't even happened yet. It might not happen. That's going to screw up the Jets. And even if it does happen, it might screw up the Jets. I just don't know if he's got the personality, Ben, that's strong enough. Like Dan Campbell, say what you want about him. He's got a strong personality, right? He can handle anything. I don't know if Aaron Glenn has that personality. The little that I know of him. It's not like I sat down and had a meal with him. But I just, like I said, I never envisioned him as a future head coach. And he goes into a hotbed like New York and has to deal with all he has to deal with, getting rid of Aaron Rodgers, maybe keeping Aaron Rodgers. Who knows? It just doesn't look good from the outside looking in.
And there's a lot outside of just the head coaching job and Aaron Glenn's philosophy that has to be ironed out. Lance Newmark, who seems to be the front runner to take over the vacant GM job, was with Aaron Glenn together in person yesterday, interviewing, I'm sure, for the vision of what that tandem would be together. They have to figure out the quarterback spot. There is so much to iron out for the Jets. It's not like, all right, Aaron Glenn is in. Here's what is going to happen. Where in Chicago, Ben Johnson introduced yesterday at Hallis Hall to the entire staff, you pretty much know what is going to happen. You've got the roster in place. You've got the quarterback position set. There might be some varying degrees of expectation in what success can look like in 2025 for Ben Johnson's first year as the Bears head coach. But Scott, it's pretty clear what the picture of that organization is moving forward.
Yeah, that you could see why a guy would be interested, right? You supposedly have your quarterback. It is a tough division, no two ways about it. But you got, talent on that team offensively and defensively. Now you need the guy to kind of put it all together. I don't know if that's really suited for a guy who doesn't have head coaching experience or a guy that, like a Mike McCarthy, who they, apparently we're going to consider, have the guy who's been down this road before. But at least, as you said, you got the direction, you got the quarterback. It's not wholesale changes of just restructuring the whole franchise.
Yeah, and it will be interesting, Scott, to see what Chicago's outlook is, win total-wise, playoff price-wise, entering 2025. Let's not forget, the Bears entering this past season, 8.5 was the win total, and the over had the juice at minus 150. What can they do now with the offensive wizard that Ben Johnson appears to be? We'll talk more around the coaching carousel and NFL news next.
The winning edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Men's top 25 hoops. Number 3, Iowa State blew out UCF 108-83. Number 4, Alabama 103-87 winners at home over Vanderbilt. Number 6, Tennessee beat number 14, Mississippi State 68-56. Number 10, Marquette 76-59 winners at Seton Hall. UCLA beat number 18, Wisconsin 85-83. Number 25, Louisville 98-73 winners at SMU. Buckeyes football celebrating their national championship victory over Notre Dame. 34-23 was the final in Atlanta on Monday night. Buckeyes quarterback Will Howard.
We were in a rough spot, and I just got to give all the credit to the guys in that locker room.
Head coach Ryan Day says this is what it's all about.
My wife and kids, and then these guys. That's why I get up in the morning every day. It's just to try to make sure these guys reach their dreams and goals.
Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive.
That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Mornings can start feeling the same. Wake up, brush teeth, go to work. But with breakfast from Wendy's, it's like, wake up, brush teeth, Baconate with a breakfast Baconator. Roll with a sausage breakfast burrito. Buddy it up with a honey buddy. Or get seasoned with seasoned potatoes. And then go to work. Sorry. When you're ready for a fresh wake-up call, gotta be Wendy's.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
Oh, could this vintage store be any cuter?
Right? And the best part? They accept Discover.
Accept Discover? In a little place like this? I don't think so, Jennifer.
Oh, yeah, huh? Discover's accepted where I like to shop. Come on, baby, get with the times.
Right, so we shouldn't get the parachute pants?
These are making a comeback. I think.
Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
You're listening to SportsGrid.
Spreading the winning edge far and wide.
Terrestrial, internet, TV, satellite, and don't forget our mobile app.
Face it.
The winning edge is everywhere.
Somewhere there's a squirrel frustrated he can't get a phone.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. Scott, we just talked about Ben Johnson meeting the staff yesterday inside hallowed Hallis Hall outside the Windy City. Formal introductory press conference happening as we speak. Ben Johnson, who of course was the offensive coordinator in Detroit, understands how difficult just starting off in the NFC North as a division is going to be, was speaking the praises of the other teams that won double-digit games this year, made it to the postseason, and then had a little bit of fun to ingratiate himself to that Chicago fan base, saying Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, two guys that are front runners to win NFL Coach of the Year, and then with a very wide grin on his face, quote, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year, understanding the Packers and the Bears, the bitterest of rivals within that division. It is a very difficult division for Chicago to start off in. And Scott, that's often how you begin to examine a team's outlook. How are they going to do against the teams they are going to see twice a year in their 6 divisional games that make up 6 of the 17 they will play over a third of their season? It's not going to be an easy start for Ben Johnson as a head coach in the NFC North.
If he really had any kind of personality, Ben, he would have said he enjoyed beating Matt Eberflus twice a year and got a kick out of the audience.
That would have been even more of a resounding applause throughout the Chicago area.
Exactly. So let me see something. I want to see some personality, I can't help but harken back to the Nick Sirianni press conference, right? When he got introduced, if you remember, he looked like a bumbling, stumbling, like, right? That turned out well. He's obviously done a good job, but your first impressions do last a long, long time, and I think we still think Sirianni is kind of a bit of a bozo. So, but yeah, he got introduced. He said the right things. Embraced himself with the Packer. Chicago Bears rivalry really hasn't been much of a rivalry as far as on the field goes because it's been completely one-sided. So maybe it is a breath of fresh air. I think he'll do well there, Ben. Listen. I'm not the biggest, everyone's going gaga over Ben Johnson, right? And I just hearken people to take it easy a little. Look at his resume, right? He's been with the Lions and he's been with the Miami Dolphins. When he was with the Miami Dolphins, 2 coaches got fired in essence. The first head coach and then Dan Campbell as the interim guy. And he didn't exactly distinguish himself. They go to Detroit, the whole, whether it's him, whether it's Aaron Glenn, Dan Campbell, give him all the credit in the world. But it's not like this guy's got a 10-year history of turning around offenses. They got fortunate. I won't say lucky. They got fortunate. Things worked out in Detroit. Hopefully it does for the Bears. He's the hottest commodity out there. There's no more excuses, right? But they've been down this road before. Matt Nagy was a terrific offensive coordinator with the Kansas City Chiefs, having some success, but limited success, working with one guy, Patrick Mahomes. Eberflus the same thing. So it's kind of like, I prefer the guy that's got 2 or 3 stops on his resume of showing, I've turned things around. Not just one, but it is what it is.
The Lions, a top 5 scoring offense all 3 years that Johnson was the OC in the Motor City. Scott, the last time the Bears were a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL over a decade ago in 2013. That is the hope with the young quarterback in Caleb Williams. And Scott, we talked about this a lot in the offseason, and that season-long prop for Caleb's rookie year, 3,400 and a half, 3,450 and a half, as it kind of worked its way higher and higher throughout the offseason. A number that Caleb Williams cleared. Now, in terms of his rookie season, it wasn't nearly as illustrious as the person you could directly compare him to, second overall selection Jaden Daniels, who was playing on Conference Championship Sunday, or even a Bo Nix, who led his team to the NFL postseason. That was also the expectation in Chicago, despite drafting first overall, a team that could contend for a playoff spot. They failed in doing so miserably. But Caleb Williams, in terms of his performance, not nearly as bad throughout his rookie season as some might think that it actually was. In fact, Scott, we said that if he were to even flirt with that preseason, season-long prop of 3,400 and a half, he would be top 5 in the history of the Bears organization in terms of passing yards in a single season. He finishes with 3,541, 5th most in a single season in Bears history. A franchise who was one of the most historic in the NFL, who has yet to have a passer of 4,000 yards. Jared Goff, under Ben Johnson, the previous 3 seasons, at least 4,400 passing yards each of the last 3. That is where you start to build the optimism in the offseason for what Caleb Williams is going to do in year 2.
Yeah. It really is amazing, the futility at the quarterback position. And this is a team that's got a Super Bowl on their resume, right? I mean, you would have thought, I would have said Jay Cutler threw for 4,000, but apparently not the case. But he goes from indoors, controlled environment, on turf, to outdoors, grass, not controlled environment, obviously. So there might be some adjustments. But you're right about Caleb Williams. Not everybody can be C.J. Stroud, and not everybody can be Jaden Daniels. It does take a year or two. And I think if you would have told Bears fans the numbers that he put up, as a first-year quarterback, when all those other guys didn't do as well, they'd say, okay,
right.
It wasn't as great as we were hoping, but certainly he showed enough promise, that there's no reason to think he can't be a successful quarterback. You can even put him behind Malik Neighbors if you just want to go for production, and a couple of wide receivers as well. He probably is even further down the list as far as actual production for rookie players. But I think he showed enough where, anyone going in there, including Ben Johnson, is not telling the Bears we need to go to ourselves a quarterback. They're saying, all right, I can make this guy a winner. So I'm expecting, that to be halfway successful next season. I don't know about playoffs just yet, but a big jump up, yes.
The Bears did allow the most sacks in the regular season in the NFL, 68 in total. Some of that on Caleb Williams, trying to be too elusive in the pocket, but it was not a great offensive line. Scott, you would have to think now with a new head coach in place That is priority number one. NFL draft, free agency, and otherwise. The Bears, much like last year when they had a ton of cap room to attack the free agency market, more than $80 million this year as well. It's got some more news around the NFL coaching circle. Speaking of offensive-minded head coaches and OCs, yesterday Brian Schottenheimer, the de facto offensive coordinator with the Cowboys this past year, did interview in person at the Star and is set to meet again with ownership in Dallas today for a second straight day. The guy's been there all year. You had a 4-hour-plus long meeting yesterday, and now 2 days in a row. What else do you need to know about Brian Schottenheimer you don't have understood already?
I know, right? It's just like we're not sure. We expect him to say something negative. Is he going to all of a sudden the epiphany's going to hit him and he's going to say something that we haven't seen or heard before? But I'll go contrarian here, Ben, and say, it's not a bad move. You're hook, line, and sinker bought into Dak Prescott, right? You signed him last year. Excuse me. So you got this monster contract. You have to assume Prescott, gets along with his offensive coordinator. Otherwise, I don't think he'd seriously be considered, right? So if that's the case, I keep on telling people this. Has their offense been great? No, it hasn't. But I always tell people, I don't necessarily care because you're no longer going to be the offensive coordinator. You're no longer going to be the defensive coordinator. You're going to hire people for that. So if he is behind the scenes showing that he's got leadership ability, people respect him, trust him. They trust his judgment in being able to handle a game and a game plan. That's what his new role is now. It's not necessarily being the offensive coordinator. So I'm not worried about, them not being a top 10 offense if behind the scenes he shows he's a leader. And, he's been there long enough. Yes, is it going to be another puppet for Jerry Jones if he gets the job? Yeah, probably. But we know that going in no matter who he hires, right? So I would be okay with this move. I really would, as long as Dak's on board.
Of course, Brian Schottenheimer, the son of the late, great Marty Schottenheimer, who coached for a long time in the NFL. Brian Schottenheimer has been the OC de facto in Dallas the last 2 years. It's really been Mike McCarthy calling the plays. But that consistency, Scott, of being there, knowing the Star, and knowing Dak is important to Jerry. We'll talk about it more next.
We're not saying every SportsGrid listener is a legend, but you might start thinking about who's going to play you in the movie. Just saying. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
With the news flash, I'm Bill Banks reporting. Brought to you by Progressive. Bundle and save at Progressive.com. 22 states are suing to stop President Donald Trump's order ending birthright citizenship. The practice guarantees U.S.-born children are citizens regardless of their parents' immigration status. Trump's executive order was signed on Monday. In Southern California, dangerous winds returned as wildfires burn in the Los Angeles area for the third straight week. Forecasters say that 70-mile-per-hour Santa Ana winds and low humidity elevate the fire danger. Power companies preemptively shut off power to more than 60,000 customers to prevent fires. In Ohio, a judge found a pastor guilty of failing to comply with the city's fire code when he opened a church to let homeless people stay inside during dangerously cold weather. The pastor of Dad's Place Church faces up to 60 days in jail. I'm Bill Banks with your news flash.
My son loves to fly kites, but my active psoriatic arthritis can sometimes hold me back. Now with Skyrizi to treat my skin and joints, I'm ready to go. Skyrizi, risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection for adults, helps with less joint pain, stiffness, swelling, and fatigue. For those who also have plaque psoriasis, 90% clearer skin is possible with just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
With Skyrizi, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement, and that means everything. Ask your doctor about Skyrizi today and visit Skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKY-RIZZI to learn more.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
More often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
For a second consecutive day, Dallas offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer is going to interview for the vacant head coaching position of the Cowboys to take over at the Star. And Scott, I think it shows some of the thought process of how this actual coaching search is playing out for Dallas, whether Schottenheimer ends up as the head coach or if it is somebody else. Of course, when Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys last week decided they would no longer work together moving forward and the expiring contract would be exactly that, expired, they made some headlines last week that Deion Sanders might be in the running to become the new head coach in Dallas. But there hasn't been a formal interview. No plans have been laid out for Deion to be there in person to interview for the head coaching job. And Scott, there's been a thought that Jerry Jones, who likes to be familiar with the people who he hires to work under him, would probably go that familiar route. Brian Schottenheimer, Kellen Moore quickly became a front-runner, former Dallas OC, current offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the fact that Brian Schottenheimer is getting a second consecutive in-person interview in as many days, Scott, kind of shows you the Cowboys are thinking people that really know the organization and have worked in the organization as of recent.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you're a victim of the circumstance if you're Dallas, right? I mean, any other team does this, and they all say, okay, makes sense. We got our star quarterback. We committed to him. We want to bring in a head coach that he's familiar with, that he's comfortable with, that he likes, and I'm assuming that's going to be the case here. Like I said, I don't think they would be hiring him if they ended up hiring him. If Dak went to Jerry and said, this guy's the worst in the world, right? So, I mean, it does make sense on paper. You can't say, well, he's so young, he doesn't have any experience as being a head coach. Well, neither is Ben Johnson, who's also young. Neither is Aaron Glenn, who's also young. I mean, and they're all going to get head coaching jobs. I mean, that's just the way it is in the NFL. It's no longer, what you've done. It's what can you do? And I'll take my chance that you can be a successful head coach. So, I mean, I really think it does make sense. Again, the offenses have been great. They haven't been awful, at least not in the regular season. So if behind the scenes he shows he can be a leader and Dak likes him and you're sold in on Dak and CeeDee Lamb being the face of the franchise like they are, it does make sense. I don't know what big name Dallas fans think they're going to attract. I mean, who wants to go? Deion Sanders. That's a headache. You don't want that. Right. So who do they really want, that they expect is going to come running to Dallas and sit there and be the man that's out there right now? So I think this makes sense. I do. He's better than Kellen Moore. I'll say that. I see Kellen Moore on the sidelines, and I think, what's this 15-year-old doing on the sidelines? I don't see any imagination with him whatsoever. You telling me some big 330-pound defensive lineman's going to listen to Kellen Moore, who looks like he's 15? Good luck on that. I'll take Brian Schottenheimer. At least he looks 40.
Yeah, we'll see. Kellen Moore, though, a very inventive offensive coordinator who had great success with Dak Prescott in Dallas. And, of course, that is still the biggest financial investment the Cowboys have at the Star. I just think it shows the thought process. 5 head coaching vacancies still outstanding in the NFL. The Cowboys, the Jets, the Jaguars, the Raiders, and the New Orleans Saints. We'll see who gets those jobs here shortly. Scott, I really did think that Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, probably the top 2 targets in this coaching cycle, might hold things up if the Lions reach the pinnacle we thought they might, the Super Bowl favorites entering divisional round weekend. I think that has kind of paced up this coaching search now that Johnson is in Chicago, and it seems Aaron Glenn is on the doorstep of becoming the Jets' next head coach. More offensive coordinator news, Scott. Yesterday, Josh McDaniels returning to Foxborough, going to work under Mike Vrabel. Spent 13 years, of course, in New England as the offensive coordinator. Most recently was in Las Vegas for a year and a half as the head coach. You could argue his head coaching acumen, Scott, for most of his time in Foxborough, a lot of it tied to Tom Brady, but also with guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and even Mac Jones early in his rookie year. Josh McDaniels has seen a lot of success with the Patriots offensively, and of course has the familiarity with his former colleague and somebody that played on teams he coached on in Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, listen, that's a pretty good hire, right? And bring back the old gang, put it all together. You got a defensive-minded head coach who I'm sure is going to say to Josh, it's your game. Go ahead. You run with it. You run completely, so it's an attractive situation. I would think from that standpoint, you don't have Belichick looking over his shoulder 24/7 anymore. So, listen, he's had success as a coordinator. He's been awful as a head coach, but as a coordinator, you can't deny it. So you got the Drake May there, so that they're hook, line, and sinker into Drake May. That makes a lot of sense on paper. I like that move.
It could be an appealing job, right? Working with Drake May, who certainly showed some spurts throughout the end of his rookie season, is pretty attractive. New England with a solid offseason and a coaching search that I think we all kind of realized was going to be exactly what it turned out to be. They also did hire, that being the Pats, a new defensive coordinator, Terrell Williams, who worked this past year in Detroit as the defensive line coach, worked with Mike Vrabel the 6 seasons that Vrabel was the head coach in Tennessee. So the Patriots pretty set. Now get to approach this offseason with the 4th overall pick and hoping to make a big splash in free agency. That's a lot of the coaching news that we have as we await any of those head coaching vacancies upcoming. We did also learn yesterday, Scott, Ron Torbert is going to be the head referee for Super Bowl 59. Worked during divisional weekend as well. One of the more recognizable, I would say, NFL referees that we see each and every week around the NFL.
Yeah, and now expect to see some trends on whether the home team has better success or the road team or the over and the under. We start analyzing some of this stuff. It's really kind of crazy. But, on the surface, okay, shouldn't be any issue. We'll see what happens this weekend before we get to the NFL. But on paper, I'm glad they didn't bring in some rookie or second or third year, referee. Not that I thought they would, but makes sense.
Torbert did referee the Super Bowl back between the Rams and the Bengals at the end of the 2021 season, Super Bowl 56 in Los Angeles. We'll talk about Conference Championship weekend before we even get to Super Bowl Sunday. Some early thoughts on both of our matchups. That comes your way next.
Luck is winning the lottery. Strategy is settling your divorce before cashing in the ticket.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern. And Pharrell, Coast to Coast, keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi. Then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to SportsGrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning-fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live on Football Full Circle, now just a few days out from Conference Championship Sunday in the National Football League. The guys back on the practice fields on this Wednesday afternoon. Probably just a light walkthrough. Pay attention to those injury and practice reports that do come out, especially with a lot of focus on the first game of Sunday, NFC Championship in Philadelphia, in the Eagles quarterback, Jalen Hurts. That ailing knee that he hurt in the second half of the divisional round against the LA Rams. Scott, as we look at that game first and foremost, our first of two matchups on Conference Championship Sunday, 6.5-point spread now in favor of the Eagles, total at 47.5. When this line opened up early Sunday night after the Eagles did outlast the Rams in that divisional round matchup, it was a 4.5-point spread in favor of Philly at home. Now we are nearing a touchdown. It does not seem the odds makers are all that scared that Jalen Hurts is not going to be near 95% effective. What about you, Scott?
I'm concerned. I really am. I'm surprised the line jumped from 5.5 to 6.5 yesterday. But maybe the signs are that he's, if not 100% completely healthy, that's the word. I don't know how they could get that word on a Tuesday before they actually get out on the practice field. And you got to remember, they split their head-to-head meetings, Ben, right? Washington winning the second game despite the 5 turnovers. But even the first game earlier in the season, Washington led 10-6 early fourth quarter. So, they ended up losing the game, but it's not like, they got blown out. They were 2 competitive games, and now you're giving me almost a touchdown. My postseason was Kansas City versus Philadelphia. Not going to jump off that, but I'm in no rush to lay 6.5. I got to see Hurts play because he was so banged up. They didn't do the push-tush when they had a 1st and goal at the 1-yard line, which ended up in a field goal drive because they were afraid to do that with him. He was so injured. Yeah. So I got to see him practice a little bit before you convince me to lay 6.5. I'm thinking Washington plus the 6.5.
And it is interesting, Scott, because the spread itself, the overall outlook of the game, expects Philly to win comfortably, and it has not moved the other way down to 3.5 or whatever it might be from where that line opened based on Jalen Hurts. But his numbers, prop market-wise, for the matchup against Washington are minimal. 179.5 through the air, 29.5 on the ground. They're not expecting the odds makers, the Eagles QB, to do much. Saquon Barkley to do a lot, 125 in a hook is his rushing yards prop. But I did find that kind of distinction and the disparity a little bit interesting. Got a much closer game go ahead.
No, I was just going to say real quick, you got to look at A.J. Brown. I mean, he's got to be a part of that, right? 3 receptions for 24 yards, last 2 games combined.
Yeah. And Scott, you think back, I believe it was the 2016 AFC Championship game, whatever it was. Ben Roethlisberger did not practice all week, wasn't even out there in warmups. Donnie brought this up today. First play, he just aired it out. They just chucked it down the field. Jalen Hurts' longest pass prop, 34.5 for if the Eagles keep it close to the vest and say, hey, we need to show you that Jalen Hurts is good to go. We'll do it from the very start on Sunday. The second game, the AFC Championship game, a matchup of 2 very familiar foes inside Arrowhead, expected to be much closer. The Chiefs and the Bills. We're talking, as we were for the Bills game against the Ravens last week, Scott, a couple of cents of difference, less than a $0.50 on the money line. Minus 126 in favor of Kansas City, plus 108 on the other side for Buffalo. 34 cents to be exact. It might sound funny to emphasize that, but in a game where we expect the margin to be that tight, it is worth noting 47.5 is the total. Early in the week, Scott, who do you give the edge to for the AFC Championship game on Sunday?
Yeah, I'm going to rely on the old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? I know Kansas City has survived. I know they shouldn't have won. I know that we've been saying that all year long. I know that, if you want to believe, and I don't, but you want to believe that the referees, helped them along last week. You can believe all that stuff, but it's all things we've been saying since game number 1. Right. So why all of a sudden should things just flip on them and then not get the breaks from the officials? So they're at home. It's basically pick 'em. You're going up against a team that they have the extra little motivation chip on their shoulder because they lost to them. I'm going with Kansas City. I'll take the Chiefs anytime, anywhere, at home in a postseason.
And the money line is, again, a couple of cents, but it is working that way as well from where this line was on Monday morning. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. That does it for us today on Football Full Circle. FFC is back tomorrow, noon Eastern time, right here on SportsGrid Radio.
Now you've done it.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge.